Dr. Neale, I think I'm going to go ahead and do the introduction and we'll get rolling here.
Okay, I'll try to behave. You go ahead.
To today's session, we're certainly pleased to, I'm Mark Doss, also on is Kendra Christians. Kendra's going to be handling the chat box services as part of the session. And we will also post notes at the end of this, and we are recording it, and we'll post the link when it's ready. So come back to the NE blog site, and you can pick up the notes or the link to pass it on to someone that may not have been available today. We're certainly pleased to have Dr. Neale with us today, and we're going to again let him take some opening remarks, and then we'll structure this in a question answer. We just finished an ELL session about an hour ago, and most of the questions were appropriate for chat and the discussion. Every now and then we would open up contributions from the field for longer explanations, and we can do that if needed. And again, as it mentions there, we'll have these notes available on the blog. All right, Dr. Neale, I'll let you have opening remarks, and then we'll jump into the questions. And
Sure.
Thanks, Mark. About 45 minutes.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks for hosting this. And maybe most of all, on behalf of the department, let me extend thanks to everyone in the field that has anything to do with trying to navigate this uncharted territory. We're very aware of how many distractions, decisions, and competing priorities you're dealing with. And as near as we can tell, people are focused on exactly what the department has hoped for, and that's the health, safety, and welfare of students, schools, and those communities. So thanks on behalf of the department for everybody who's working so hard to make things right during this unprecedented time. You may or may not know that we started to post a COVID-19 resource page link. It's linked to the homepage of the DESE website. We update that as regularly as we have good, solid information for the field. So I would encourage people to go to the DESE website and check that link regularly. You'll already see that the commissioner has made a very strong statement about the forgiveness of hours for districts that find themselves in need of that for calendar purposes to meet the minimum calendar standards. I believe our website either has or will have shortly a very standard short waiver request that is essentially fill out a form, sign your name, and send it in for superintendents to use and make that efficient. We had a lot of questions early on about virtual education and meeting the needs of students. We had a lot of questions early on about can we claim those hours for attendance? And what was apparent to us is the harder we worked to figure out how to do that, the more regulatory we became without any good outcome. And so we backed off of some earlier guidance that said if you are virtual and if you are meeting the needs of all students, we have a statute that lets you claim attendance. If attendance hours are going to be forgiven anyway, that takes away the need to claim attendance because, of course, what you're doing is taking the numbers out of the top and the bottom, out of the numerator and the denominator, both, and so your payment is preserved. By and large, we think that will take care of just about everything that needs to be taken care of. And we found that people were able to open up and use a combination of virtual and paper and pencil assignments for their students, and they're working very hard to make sure that all students are receiving some kind of instruction, including special education students. Very important civil rights issue there. If we provide it for one, we provide it for all. And really see a lot of people handling that very well. I think that probably the other big news that I'd put out there before we start to discuss questions is the fact that last week, Commissioner canceled all state assessments for the spring of 2020. We wanted to remove that distraction again so that superintendents and school leaders focus on what's good for kids and not worry about issues of accountability there. On Friday, we sent a waiver request into the Department of Education in Washington, D.C., and received an almost immediate response that the waiver request was in order. They expected to approve it, and we are just awaiting that final confirmation on proceeding as if it will be approved. But the commissioner has canceled that testing, and we'll just sort it out if something doesn't come through from Washington, D.C. So with that in mind, I probably have covered the big points that I think I wanted to cover, and we'll let the chat box or the questions submitted control the rest of our time together.
One question that's come in about the attendance waiver you mentioned, will that be filled out after you return to school?
Yes, it's better to do that after the fact than before the fact.
Okay. Will there be a waiver for CCR 3.1, 3.3, and CCR 3.4 accountability measures?
We're still working on that. Even as late as this morning, we had information come in about international baccalaureate testing. And I think very shortly we'll have guidance coming out about that. Again, if you remember that the department's guiding light, the North Star for us is there is always a time for testing and accountability except right now. It's an important part of what we do, but right now it is not the critical measure, and we're trying to keep everything off of leaders in the field so that they can focus on the students.
If seniors have 24 credits, but this is lower than current district requirement, will we need to revise our board policy to waive the last credit for graduates this year?
Well, I want to assure you I'm not an attorney and I'm not a policy service, but it would seem to me very wise to consult your policy service and put in either an emergency policy or have the board formally waive if they are going to operate differently than their policy says.
If high-set testing centers become unavailable due to university closures, can we serve as our own testing center? And if not, what extensions will be allowed?
Yeah, that's a really good question and really challenging. We did explore that a little earlier this week and found that high-set is to stand up a testing center even temporarily is a fairly tall order. Requires a certified tester, room specifications, so on and so forth. I think that I don't want to say anything's impossible, but that looks like a really tall order to fill to open up a temporary center. What I would suggest, and I suspect, having watched the chat box come by as they came out of the Springfield area, and rather than trying to start a new one, a cooperative agreement between the interested people and the folks running the center to keep it open might be a better approach. Now, what do we control? At DESE, we haven't published this yet, but we certainly are prepared to make an exception for students that took their education in the spring, should have tested in the spring, and simply through no fault of theirs or their schools were not able to. So things like high set or other testing that might go on in the summer, we can credit to the prior year really much later than we have been. We haven't set a date yet, but we'll allow a much later crediting to the prior year than we have in the past.
Will the U.S. Constitution and civics test requirements be waived for this year's seniors?
You know, I would love to tell you I have the power to do all of that. We have developed some draft guidance, again, not yet published, but very near being published on how to meet those requirements, maybe in some ways that are not standard or traditional. For instance, CPR instruction could happen. You know, as you know, the statute requires 30 minutes of CPR and Heimlich maneuver instruction. Nobody said it had to be done live. Nobody said it had to be done in a classroom. So you could do that through YouTube or any other number of ways. I know Red Cross has a fairly inexpensive requirement for online class for CPR instruction. That's possible. The Constitution tests, of course, are locally developed and can be selected or developed and administered online, or as long as some other statutory or public health, executive order or public health requirement isn't breached, done in small groups live. However, with all that said, we are trying to figure out ways to navigate statute that exists. And at the same time, our attorneys are examining statutes that we believe schools need relief from this spring. And those two requirements are on our list to try to see if we can't get a temporary suspension of those requirements. It's just not within the power of the department to waive law.
Will there be any extensions for core data end of year reporting?
Our normal process clearly has to be delayed and suspended. We haven't set dates yet. Those discussions of what dates should we use just started today. And I think right now it's a little early to say we know what needs to happen. As you know, just this morning there were some announcements in Boone County and Greene County about extensions of shelter in place or stay at home orders and closures of schools. Every time something like that happens, it's a game changer, but we're very aware of the need to be flexible and reasonable about deadlines.
Will districts still have to hold a Title III meeting? And if so, how can they do that?
We are seeking from the Federal Department of Education, that's a federal requirement, we're seeking additional flexibility for them. The assessment waiver was an expedited waiver, very quick, but traditional waiver for certain flexibilities like that, whether it's Title III or Title I, and we'll publish that as soon as we have any guidance.
Do we have provided free and reduced meals daily if we have been approved for the seamless summer option? Can we package up more than 1 day's worth of food?
Wow, completely out of my wheelhouse. I think we probably better say contact Barbara Shaw at School Food and Nutrition Services for an answer to that.
Will districts still need to complete the exception code list for seniors?
We don't believe that that's going to be necessary, particularly since we not schools, suspended state testing. I'm sure that what we're discussing is whether or not districts and charter schools will be dinged on graduate level not determined issues. Since we suspended that, we will not. We'll also suspend the graduate L&D requirement.
Will there be allowance for extended summer school options?
Really looking at that right now, and that's out of Roger Dorson's shop primarily, even though mine administers the applications. There's some fairly significant fiscal implications for that. And I think the idea that we're not sure if we're closed for 2 or 3 weeks or 6 or 8 weeks, or heaven forbid something longer than that, we have to develop that and give that out soon. I don't know whether we will use some different structure than in the past or not.
One comment that came through on the food issue, there has been guidance that you can package more than a day's worth of food come out over the past week. One of our participants has given us that insight. Next question, will DESE communicate with MDHE for students in Algebra 1 who do not take the Algebra 1 EOC?
Well, that's an internal discussion right now. We think it's possible that we'll be able to make Algebra 1 available, even if it's not a standard census administration for those seniors who need that. We also think that MDHE, or now known as DHEWD, Department of Higher Education and Workforce Development, they are looking for workarounds as well. Their current guidance I read it this morning, is that they continue to work on that and are in communications with us. Commissioner Mulligan spoke to that last night on the press conference with the governor, that that's an area they're working on.
Okay, that's the end of our questions for now. So if anyone has questions, please go ahead and submit those in the chat feature. Here's one. Are there talks about allowing districts to start next year's classes prior to the stated law?
Well, I think that's an area of discussion for us. Again, that is Missouri statute, and one that was held pretty firmly to over the last several months in terms of any other discussions. So I think that we have been talking about it. I am not at all sure that that's something that will be allowed. It would take either an executive order or a change from the legislature.
Just for clarification, districts are going to be allowed to define and set graduation requirements for seniors, such as credit amounts?
To be clear, the State Board of Education sets minimum credits, and they haven't yet waived that. Most districts and charters have higher credit requirements than those minimums set by the State Board of Education. Local boards of education can certainly come down to the minimums unless and until the state board waives those. But districts, charters have for a long time had latitude not only on what the requirements are, but how they are met. So some of the questions we've had lately would have to do with, we didn't have enough time to finish the class. What about the low grade point average? We can't get this done. You can use a demonstration. You can use a video demonstration. You can use anything that is competency based, including assessment, to establish that a student has met the graduation requirements, that is to say, the essential curriculum identified by the Board of Education, and grant credit. School districts are free to make pass-fail decisions rather than a grading scale decision. I just want to advise that, as with our first question or our second, if there is policy that governs how these credits are awarded or how grades are figured, local districts should consult their policy service, should certainly consider if a revision is needed, and to apply whatever they do evenly across all students.
Okay, we're getting lots of questions about algebra and EOC. So let's start with this one. Will the students 9th through 11th be required to take the EOCs they were scheduled to take this year in the following years?
Well, we haven't yet made decisions about those things. It's pretty easy to forgive testing in the spring. It's easy to say we will suspend some portion of the APR as we have already. But those downstream discussions are quite different and are fairly dependent on when does school resume, what character does it take locally and on a statewide basis. And those discussions have not yet ended in an answer.
Okay. How would you advise schools to take attendance if their students are completing virtual lessons?
Well, Missouri law indicates that if the virtual class meets the requirements of 162.1250, the revised statutes of Missouri, then they are perfectly welcome, perfectly legal to claim attendance credit if they wish to. And it happens right now at a rate of 94%, unless, of course, it's a MOCAP course and the student's an A+ eligible student, in which case it's 95%.
For the less than 24 credit senior who was unable to take the high set, what should the student plan be in the coming days if we are unsure about the ability to test?
I'm not sure. Can we get the question stated in a different way?
Okay. Here's another one about Algebra 1, and I'm not sure. I'm not an education person, I'll admit that, so this might be something that you've already answered, and if it is, we can move on. Will non-seniors have to take the Algebra 1 EOC at a later date, such as next year, even when the lapse between coursework and testing?
It would be difficult for me to imagine that a one-year waiver of testing would completely suspend federal law forever, which does require the taking of EOCs. It's how are we going to address that that's in question.
Will freshmen who take Algebra 1 this year be required to take the Algebra 1 EOC next school year while they are sitting in geometry?
The Missouri plan for Every Student Succeeds Act would allow them to take geometry if that is their first class in high school, first math class in high school. The part of the plan that doesn't speak to that is whether or not they have to have taken the Algebra 1 EOC first. But I suspect the geometry EOC would count for accountability credit then.
Okay, here is the restated question, I believe. If a student has 16 credits, they should have taken the HiSET in March. If the test is not available, should we hurry to try to meet the 24 credits?
You know, I'd really appreciate it if you sent that. I know that you're transcribing and recording this. If you will make sure I get that in writing, we'll get that to the folks who administer HiSET and get a good answer for you.
Okay. Are districts required to pay for MOCAP courses if requested by the student or parent while schools are shut down?
You know, we had that come up earlier, and I'm not sure whether this is a new enrollment or whether an existing enrollment, but if classes have, and it's an area that we haven't had the attorneys weigh in on, if this is a new enrollment, local enrollment policies would govern that. And if it is an existing MOCAP course, I would encourage districts to consider continuing that because it's a place where a student is really more likely having more continuity of learning than most students today.
All right, we've once again reached the end of our questions in the chat. And I know, Chris, you were planning to have only about half an hour with us, so I don't know if you want to make some closing remarks.
Sure. Well, what I'm reading in these remarks, almost without exception, is a set of ideas, thoughts, uncertainties that we are having internal conversations about right now. And as soon as we have thoroughly vetted the answers that we think are the very best thing we can do for the field, we publish those, and we'll continue to update that COVID-19 page. We have several pieces of guidance in the works right now, and as soon as everyone's seen them and blessed them and so on and so forth, we'll bring that out. But more than anything, I want to repeat my thanks on behalf of the department for everybody in the field that's working so hard to focus right now on taking care of students, their health, their safety, their welfare, those of their schools and those of their communities. Some of these questions are really critical, but they can wait just a little longer for a coming year. And I don't want to diminish their importance, but I do want to say, for now, let's make sure we're focused on students and doing all we can to take care of them and keep ourselves safe.
Thank you, Chris. We'll post the recording link on the blog page of the NE public website, and we'll also add the notes document from today's discussion on that same blog page. We look forward to sharing that information. Chris, thanks for taking time for joining us today and sharing your expertise and at least the information as of today that's available from the department.
As of today. Don't forget to check our webpage, and thank you for hosting. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris, for your time. We really appreciate it.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Before everybody runs away, we do have some upcoming events. We've got a webinar Friday morning on SPED students in the remote learning environment. Next Monday, Monday morning, we're going to host a kind of a Leading in Difficult Times presentation by Todd Whitaker. We'll have registration information on the NEE site for that. And a week from today at 1 o'clock, a eMints Zoo K-12 online conversation about remote learning. Just some more resources and expertise there. If you'd like to join us for those sessions, we would certainly welcome you. And that goes for NEE districts as well as any non-NEE districts. In this time, we're trying to help any way we can. Appreciate you all joining us today, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.